welcome. This is a special edition of The Other Kenya, not Checkpoint, but The Other Kenya. The hashtag is The Other Kenya, and we are going to be commemorating 52 years of internal self-rule tomorrow, Madaraka Day, an important and historic occasion for this country, especially for those who fought for the land that a lot of Kenyans went into the bush for. Have we resolved that very tricky land question 52 years on? What are the steps that have been taken? We have two guests, one here in studio and one live with us from Mombasa. In studio with us is Amina Hashi from Sagana Birik Law Firm. She practices in land, environment, and with a specialty in community lands, right? And joining us from Mombasa is Najib Shamsan. He's a land activist. Thank you very much for joining us, Najib. One more guest was supposed to be here with us in studio. His name is Tom Aziz Chavangi. He is the CEO of the National Lands Commission, confirmed quite early. Unfortunately, he is not here yet. We're hoping that there might have been some problem and that he hasn't stiffed us because of the difficult conversation. Anyhow, we shall find that out later. Anyway, let's get into the topic right now, and I'll start with you, Amina. Your focus, of course, is in community lands, but let's paint a global picture here. How far do you think the Jubilee government has come with respect to resolving some of the questions that they raised as being solutions that they would try and address in their manifesto?
Thank you for having me, Alan. If you have read the Jubilee Manifesto, you'd understand why they are lagging behind in the implementation of land reforms in Kenya. Their manifesto, especially on community land and private and public land, is a little bit upside down. Mm-hmm. They tend to give long-term solutions that don't have actual deliverables attached to it. Yeah. I'll give you an example. They talk about adjudicating and titling community land, but they have not actually done the basic, which is to ensure, with the tyranny of numbers, that the community land bill, according to Article 63 of the Constitution, actually is effective and becomes law. Because that's the initial step. That's where we need to start. Then we map out what lands do we have. 60 to 60% of the land in Kenya is community land. So if the Jubilee government was really resolved in addressing the land question, they could have started by addressing 60 to 67% of where the land is. Mm-hmm. And then the rest will gradually get there. We cannot say they have, now that's where we see that their community land bid was probably not their strongest deliverable. Mm-hmm. The other thing with the Jubilee government 2 years down, their manifesto is very wordy, mm-hmm. and it paints a dream of we can achieve much more from that coalition. Yeah. But without politics, just analyzing their manifesto and what they've done, I think they have gone contrary to the grain and what they stand for as a coalition. In terms of their manifesto. And one of the issues there, of course, was the issuance of 3 million title deeds within 5 years. I'll get to you in a moment with your perspectives on that. But the area where the first batch of title deeds was issued was the coast. Najib Shamsan now joins us from there. Najib, you witnessed a ceremony there. A lot of people were happy about the handing over of title deeds. Was there anything wrong with what had happened, quite frankly, when President Uhuru Kenyatta issued those title deeds to people in a coast province, in a coastal region, rather?
Thank you, John. First of all, we really appreciated the Jubilee government. For the first time, we could see title deeds being issued to us collectively at the podiums, and we really were happy about it. And we're still happy about it. Unfortunately, since it was a pilot project, we had some hiccups here and there, like the production of it. There was some spelling mistakes. Some of them were given to the people that could not even inherit because of the issues of long-term pending due to the, unfortunately, of the stalled schemes. Mm-hmm. But all in all, to us, it was an achievement because at least somebody somewhere would remember the coast province, people that wanted title deeds, and we really got the title deeds. Yeah, definitely there are issues here and there that would come up as a pilot project, but we really said it was a good initiative.
All right. In terms of the initiative, Najib, I'll stick with you. What has the progress been since? Are people benefiting off of the land that was given to them under those titles?
Yes, thank you for that again. People benefited, but as I said, the issue of the titling came up with issues. One of them is inheritance. Well, title deed is given to you and your father passed a long time ago, the succession issue comes up, and it's a very expensive issue. And you find that doing a probate on administration, it's a lot of money. So somehow, somewhere, people tend to lose hope because they could not change the names from their forefathers who had passed on to now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, whatever happened, happened. But now, people do appreciate. And we got the title deeds. And so, as for the previous governments, people could not get title deeds straight away from the president.
Yes.
Here we are receiving title deeds, and we got the documentations. We have security of tenure. Spelling mistakes were there because of production, but there are ways of rectifying that.
Yeah.
What is needed here clearly is awareness, advocacy, and some kind of creation that people could change these things. I know politics have taken place on such kind of matters, but truly we benefited.
Now, speaking of which, in terms of advocacy, in terms of making the people aware of their rights as associated with land after receiving those title deeds, what civil society, what are people like yourselves doing about that in terms of publicizing the information that needs to be getting to the grassroots about this?
What we have done so far, we've been doing land clinics in the entire different counties, that having a spelling mistake or a word, it needs a small initiative of doing an affidavit and changing that. Secondly, we are trying to tell them the importance of having the documentation, because these documentations will never get it once again. As you know, right now, the system is computerized. So we've been informing them that once you get this kind of documentation, please keep it safe,
all right,
keep it sound, involve your family, and make it probably a co-ownership issue.
Okay. All right, Najib, now that's one area of success. I'll get back to you now, Amina, but in terms of the fairly lofty goal of 3 million title deeds in 5 years, with 60 to 67% of the land in Kenya unadjudicated, is that a possibility? Is that something that can work?
It can work, and it can actually be done. One thing I'm very pessimistic about in Kenya is that we are not short of talent, we are not short of manpower, we are not short of actually setting deliverables that are achievable. So we can do it, but in the coast, it's a good thing. You issue titles because those lands were already adjudicated, the settlement schemes, so it's a good thing for them. But now saying you will issue that in community land, there'll be a lot of trouble, because what kind of titles are you going to issue the community? Are you giving them a community title? Have we reconciled the differences of rights, user rights or land rights within the community setup?
Yeah.
We have the community land rights collectively. We have individual rights within community right. Have we clearly addressed those issues before actually registering customary land?
But that should be cleared up in the regulations of the Land Registration Act, the Lands Act, all of those acts, the Community Land Bill as well. All of those should clear that up. Who is holding up this process? Is it the National Lands Commission? Is it the National Assembly? Who's to blame for the hold-up in such an important issue?
To be honest, Alan, I'll tell you where the Community Land Bill stopped. There was a government-led task force that was established, highly professional. They did all the rounds. They used public service, money from you and I as taxpayers, and they did a job to create that legal framework for the adjudication, registration, and governance of community land. As far as I know, that land bill is with the minister. So that's the Ministry of Land, Housing, and Urban Development. Why it has not gone to Parliament? Of course, there's a lot of political issues in between. I don't think the National Land Commission has a lot to do with the Community Land Bill, because it was a ministerial initiative and it's already gone to the minister. But one thing that we need to do as Kenyans is come August 27th, when the Constitution was promulgated, we need to ask our leaders, where is that bill? Because the Constitution is very clear that that bill must be enacted, and it must be enacted within 5 years. Waiting for the bill for August, and of course you heard what our speaker said, that they can always extend that that timeline, raises a lot of mischievous.
Yeah.
You could sense there's some mischief.
Speaking of that mischief, Amina, and Najib, you'll jump in a moment. Speaking of that mischief, the problems between the National Lands Commission, and Tom Chavangi should have been here to answer this, the problems between the National Lands Commission and the substantive ministry, what do you see as being the result of that, especially regarding these kinds of regulations?
Yeah, as you said, we wish the CEO was here so we could actually throw that question to him. But I can answer that in my capacity as a professional practicing lawyer. I can say the standoff between the ministry and the National Land Commission, not only in private practice, but generally it's causing a lot of chaos in terms of policy implementation, program implementation, activities. You don't know who is supposed to do what.
Yeah.
But deep down, I think it can be aired out. I don't think anything that they're fighting over, the Supreme Court cannot make a ruling, but that ruling needs to come yesterday. It should not have been for us, because we're talking about Madaraka Day, self-rule. We were happy, or our grandfathers were happy, that finally we could be able to breathe with Kenyan leadership. And what's happening is that we're being treated to a game of hide and seek, because I think it goes down to who wants more power, because if you control land and the land sector, then you control the politics of this country.
That's true.
You create a political elite, a class of political elite, and anytime you want to jostle or shake the status quo as it is now in the land sector, of course you could send a lot of people home. So it's a very emotive issue, but it's not an issue that we as Kenyans cannot do and sort it out. But once we address the land question, I'm very positive that Kenya can be the best country in East and Central Africa.
Great and positive, but the reality is that there's things that need to be resolved between the National Lands Commission as well as a substantive ministry. Najib, down in the coastal region, what sort of problems is that fight between the National Lands Commission and the ministry causing?
One of them is, our expectation that the cost was very high when we have the NLC. And one of them was our life would change drastically. We were sure that we have the commissioner coming from Coast Province, and we knew this thing would change. But now down the line, now 3 years down the line, we're not seeing any scorecard, we're not seeing any report cards. In fact, it has been a hectic, because we always see them on television, public relationship, we see them on the newspapers, but on the ground, there's nothing. We are disparate. We have a lot of desperation. Our life is not changing anymore. Squatterism is so much here. Land invading is so much here. Ethnicity versus the land politics is so much here. Every day you see youth invading private land, idle land. Leases are being renewed every day. So with us, we're just feeling there's something wrong somewhere. Yeah. And somebody has to stand up.
How about
we even ask the executive now to step in.
Yeah, how about duplication of roles down there? Because the National Lands Commission, as is said in the Constitution, administers land on behalf of the county governments, as land is a devolved function. Is there a duplication of roles that's slowing down processes in terms of registering of titles and leases down in the coastal region? What sort of duplications are we seeing?
Yeah, at the beginning, we knew NLC had no budget, but at the moment, we know it has a very good budget. That they should now we should see them visible doing these things. We could see now the County Land Management Board already on the devolution side, but there are no regulations as my colleague has just put it across. All this now is a problem, because now, unless we put these things clear, when you don't have regulations and you don't have rules, we only have laws, then this is an issue that needs to be discussed more.
Yeah, and you pointed to there being violent takeovers of land, people encroaching on land. Amina, this being a serious problem, especially in areas where there's community land. We've seen the violence in Nadome having its roots in boundary disputes. We've seen that violence spill over in different parts of the country, Kilifi, for instance, a lot of encroachment, as well as in the western region. How urgent is this with respect to the regulations, and who needs to be able to stand up and make sure that these regulations are passed?
The easier answer, John, would be the government, as we always say, but we need to be specific when you say government. Who is government? And I always say this, that we, the people of Kenya, are actually superior. We are the ones who are slightly above government. So by us leaving and saying, oh, let let's take the easy way out and say government should do it. I think when you look at Nadome, Turkana, all these issues that raise insecurity, especially within the pastoralist community, it borders down to what is just boundary issue and how they define community land, their perspective on community land. They don't care about what the Constitution says, what is community land. They know what is community land within their informal setup.
But isn't the NLC supposed to be taking up this mantle and communicating this to the people on the ground? Can we blame the fight between the ministry and the NLC on them not doing something as rudimentary as this?
No, we can. We can blame NLC and ministry, but I think the people who need to step up is the IEBC, because boundary issue is primarily one of their functions and their roles. And then we cannot hide behind this multifaceted dimension where we say different organizations have duplicity of roles, and that's a way. It's an excuse that most people tend to use, but I think IEBC needs to come up, clearly tell us what the boundaries are. Of course, there'll be a lot of issues because they'll give us provisional boundaries, which most communities believe those boundaries were messed up to favor certain communities or to favor certain political elite. That is the conversation we need to have even before the community land bill comes in, because then once we inform the community, once the IEBC gives us a format and says this is where your land ends, then you can be able to do advocacy, as Shamsan says, to enable the community to understand that even though we have provisional administrative boundaries, that is the boundary within the law that will be recognized for purposes of recognition, registration, and adjudication of community lands.
Those are community lands, and majority of them are in rural Kenya. Majority of them, of course, it's 67% of the land mass in this country. Urban areas, of course, require similar kind of focus. Now, I don't know if it's too much of an extrapolation, but the floods that we saw in Nairobi, the floods that we're seeing right now in Mombasa, can we place some portion of the blame on the Ministry of Lands, on the National Lands Commission, in terms of enforcing the correct laws in terms of zoning, in terms of planning of land, and in terms of land use in urban areas?
Absolutely, absolutely. When you look at, I think now the National Land Commission is drafting the National Land Use Policy, but if you look at when this land policy is coming in, this should have been done so many years back. I think we need to stop as a nation, and especially anyone, professionals, media, and government, just listening at what people give as sorry excuses for not doing their job properly, and then we try and do some cosmetic surgery and just tiptoe around us being scared enough to say that is not good enough. There is a national land use policy that is being drafted by the National Land Commission. Again, stakeholders like Shamsan, civil society, media, you and I have to sit down and look at that policy and see if it works for us, and especially if that policy will be able to address the issue of planning. Poor planning has always been something that we tend to blame previous governments and successive governments.
But it is a current issue.
It is a current, it can be sorted out. All we need to do is people who've been given jobs to do, sit down and do your job. If you can't do your job properly, don't waste taxpayers' money, just exit. Kenya is one of the most educated countries in East and Central Africa. You can be replaced. So I think it's just about patriotism. Love what you do what you love, but don't use public money to just offer us a sorry excuse for your ineptness.
All right, Najib, let's get you in there. Right now, there are floods all over the place in Mombasa. Who do the people blame? Do they even see this as an issue with respect to land use and land planning?
Yes. One, as my colleague has just put it, that we have the policy coming up. But again, the ministry now is also drafting what we call physical planning bill. So we are seeing too much bills coming up, but in real sense, as a local mwananchi, what I want is services. What I want is my safety. What I want is my life to be better. When I'm seeing floods, I don't care about which bill, I don't care which act, I don't care which what. What I want is my life changing, is my life improving.
Najib, shouldn't they care about the bills? Shouldn't they care about whose responsibility it is, so that if they're taking this to court, if as a citizen I want to take this to court, I don't just sit and complain, but take it to the right doorstep?
We have been having all these laws in Kenya, all these bills in Kenya, but what is functional? What is workable? The most important thing here is things that can work. Drainage systems have to be opened up. Development control has to be done. So you find everything is in a mess up because somebody somewhere decides not to work.
All right, Najib, let me put you on the spot here. You are a land activist. You understand this from the point of view of land. And in terms of land planning and land use in the coastal region, it's particularly bad. What have you done specifically to ensure that there is some push towards there being a proper land plan, even if it's a master plan, coming down from different counties in the coast?
In Mombasa, we have the spatial plan right now, which we are trying to negotiate and we are trying to come up with. We already have a consultation meeting and the stakeholders, but as you know now, planning is continuing, but now effects are coming up.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So mine is the issue now. A local person, would he care about that bill when his life is in danger, when his pit hole is full of water?
All right, and he makes a fair point.
When the drainage system is blocked everywhere.
Yes. All right, Najib, we'll get back to you in a moment. He makes a fair point about how much the public should know and how much they should care, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But one issue that has been associated with land since prior to independence is corruption. And the fight between the NLC and the ministry seems to be leaving very serious gaps in terms of exploitation, specifically around the renewal of leases. How do you think that fight affects that renewal of leases? How can we be certain that when leases are being renewed or not being renewed under it's not really a sink for corruption?
Thank you, Alan. I think that is a genuine concern for every Kenyan because when you talk about renewal of leases, that's as per the National Land Commission Act, that's one of their functions. But that's also an administrative function. Mm-hmm. So when you go before a committee of the National Land Commission that is discussing around the issue of whether they will make up a decision to renew or not renew your lease, Kenyans need to know that's an administrative process. It needs to comply with Article 47 of the Constitution. It needs to be fair. It needs to be fast. It needs to be it needs to be an expeditious process.
All right, let's go to the point here in terms of corruption. Where within the land's administrative body does corruption start? Corruption around land start? Is there one specific department? Corruption is like a cancer. Mm-hmm. It starts somewhere and spreads everywhere. But where does it start?
Without evidence, I would not say a particular group is corrupt.
All right,
I can say genuinely the land question, anything to do with land, we will see lots of corruption. But I can tell you where corruption comes in. Mm-hmm. Corruption comes in especially in public land, because of the issue of how do you then allot public land to private individuals. The conversion process from public land to private land, that is an ambiguity. We give a lot of credence to now the National Land Commission. Before it was just a solely governmental function. That's why we've lost a lot of our public land and the issue of all these reports surrounding public land.
All right, the current land grab saga, it pits two individuals, and this is something that can be replicated across the country. Yeah. Pits two individuals with two title deeds that seem to be legal. Yeah. Wouldn't you say then that in terms of identifying that piece of land and giving generating two title deeds, that the surveyor's office would be to blame for quite a number of those cases in terms of duplication of title deeds?
That's not only the surveyor, it's the adjudication office, the survey office, the registration office. So all those officers under the Ministry of Land, now under the National Land Commission, that's an avenue. All that is a potential landmine or a potential source of corruption. But if you allow me to just go around the community land bill, I can tell you, once we have exhausted public land, which we are almost about 80%, because we've done all sorts of corruption deals around public land, now we're looking at community land. Ambiguity of law always serves the political elite. Now, because we don't have community land, just ask yourself as Kenyans, where are we? In what land do we have this large-scale acquisition of land? It's not public land because it's less than 13% of our land mass. Yeah. It's not private land because then they'll have to negotiate with you for a lease and they'll have to pay you a lot of money. where are they getting this land to do all this mega project? It's on community land.
Yes.
In the absence of a clear framework to protect community land, we will lose and we will create 67% of the headache, so it will be 3 times more than what was on the public land. So I can tell you that is the next avenue of what I'd call the second scramble and petition for Africa, only that this time around it's being camouflaged in the name of large-scale investment. Investment is good. Don't get me wrong. I love investment. I want to see us drive through superhighways and everything. But we need to do reasonable investment with a lot of cognizance to community land rights.
All right, Najib, I'll just come to you for a final comment, just picking off from where Amina stopped. LAPSET. LAPSET's SGR, those are huge infrastructure projects that will affect the coastal region. With respect to community land especially, now you went into court to force a gazettement of the National Lands Commission ways back. There are regulations that would make clear these ambiguities that remain, as Amina has mentioned. Are you drafting anything to ensure that that kind of land doesn't become a sinkhole for yet more corruption, especially in your region?
One, I should comment about the leases. You know, there's no clear criteria on how to renew leases. And the renewal of leases is one of the massive corruption we are seeing here. This, at the ministry level, on all registries, this is the only ministry you see cartels, brokers, idlers, joyriders roaming around the areas.
Yeah.
So unless these kind of people are removed in that area, then corruption is always smearing around that area.
All right, but how about
Secondly,
community lands? Yes. How about community lands, Najib, as we wind up? Unfortunately, we were pressed for time, so I'm just going to have to press you to answer to that question specifically. Community lands, specifically around huge infrastructure investments like LAPSET, like the SGR. What are you doing in terms of preparing the people there to ensure that their land is not, does not become a sink for corruption?
One of it, in the compensation already there's corruption. In the compensation already there's corruption. Because the vetting is corrupted, and we are seeing people not being paid what they gave out, and we are seeing people not prepared in mindset in terms of the compensation. So people are being given money to change their lifestyle so that now they can improve it, but now they go up and resquatter somewhere else. Therefore, the massive evictions along the LAPSET, along the 1 million acreage is an issue. As much as you're going to defend the community land, but if there's no preparation in mindsets in regard to that, then whatever we are doing here is something that needs to be thought again. All right,
Najib Shamsan, a land activist based out of Mombasa, thank you very much for joining us. Amina, unfortunately, that's where we're going to have to end it. Amina Hashi, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Lots of opportunities to talk about this, hopefully also tomorrow. Tom Chavangi has just written in saying that he's on his way from Naivasha, so we will forgive you this time around, Tom, and hopefully next time we'll get an opportunity to talk about this. Thank you very much for joining us on this discussion. It is an important discussion leading up to Madaraka Day. Think about that, reflect on it. What is your role in ensuring that land does not continue to be a sink for corruption 52 years into our internal self-rule? Of course, Yvonne Okwara has been following this discussion and now has a few points from this very same discussion, of course, also including some of your feedback. Yvonne.
Now, the reason this discussion on land in the country is so important 52 years after self-rule is a fact that we're all very familiar with, that grievances of a land have triggered violence in this country after almost every election except 1992. We're currently now, even under the Jubilee administration, grappling with issues like the Karen land grab saga. We cannot tell who the owners of that are. So what is the point tonight? Firstly, it's that the wrangles between the National Land Commission and the Ministry of Lands threaten to put Jubilee's goals on land a step back. Here is what they promised in their land reforms. This is in their manifesto. They talked about the fact that they were going to establish and reinforce a mandatory national land register and computerize and digitize land registry and management systems. They also talked about reforming land control boards and abolishing search fees. Your guess is as good as mine, and even if we take a look at what is happening between these two bodies that are supposed to govern matters of land, how far have we come with this? Is Jubilee government going to be the one that stems these problems once once and for all, and corruption is beginning to set root in the National Lands Commission. As our guest today said, the ambiguity regarding community land in this country is the next time bomb. When we're done with dividing public land, what's next? Community land. So this is something we might have to think about very seriously. And the final point tonight is that perhaps creative thinking is required in how we're going to talk about land use differently. We all know how we think about land as a measure of success, as a measure of status in society. For everyone that gets a job, the first thing you think about is getting that quota, that 100 by 100 piece of land. Will Jubilee government be able to make sure that land now becomes a factor of production rather than a means of it, considering the fact that 67% of land in this country is unadjudicated, with 20% of the land in the country under title deeds? These are some of the questions that we need to think about and ponder on as we celebrate 52 years of self-rule tomorrow. That tonight is the point.